You ever wonder if a single speech can actually change the world? I mean, can a few words, spoken at just the right time, really redraw the map and define a whole generation? Well, we're about to look at one that did exactly that. And these are the words. In March of 1946, Winston Churchill said this, and that one phrase, Iron Curtain, painted a picture so powerful that it came to define the next 40 years of world history. So, what on earth was he talking about? What was this Iron Curtain? And maybe the biggest question, how could one speech have that kind of impact? All right, let's dive in and break it all down. To really get why this speech was such a big deal, we have to go back in time. We need to understand the world that Churchill was speaking to. Okay, so picture it. The year is 1946. World War II, the deadliest conflict in human history, is finally over. And you'd think everyone would be celebrating, right? But the peace felt shaky. The alliance between the West, countries like the US and Britain, and the Soviet Union, an alliance that was absolutely necessary to win the war, was already starting to fall apart. It was a really tense time. And this is where Winston Churchill steps onto the stage. Now, he wasn't the Prime Minister of Britain anymore, but he was still a huge deal, a world leader who had been instrumental in winning the war. He traveled all the way to a small college in Missouri, in the US, because he had a message, a warning that he believed the world absolutely had to hear. And that warning came wrapped in a simple but unforgettable metaphor, the Iron Curtain. He asked his audience to imagine a line, not a real one, but a symbolic one, slicing right through the middle of Europe, a massive, impenetrable barrier. And this wasn't just a small line. He described it stretching all the way from the Baltic Sea in the north down to the Adriatic Sea in the south. And he said that behind this curtain were the ancient, famous capitals of Eastern Europe. He listed off countries like Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Hungary. All of them, he said, were falling under an incredible amount of control from Moscow, the capital of the Soviet Union. Now, this was a huge shock, because it went against everything the war was fought for. The promise was a free Europe, where countries could hold their own elections and choose their own destiny. But the reality? Churchill described it as a world of police states, where people had no basic rights and where the Communist Party held all the power. But this speech was about more than just lines on a map. At its very core, it was a warning about a clash of ideas, a warning against tyranny. So let's talk about that word, tyranny. It's a key part of this whole thing. Basically, tyranny is when a government has total unchecked power. It means they can deny you basic rights like free speech, and they rule through fear, often using secret police to keep everyone in line. And he connected it directly to something everyone remembered all too well. He basically said, look, we've seen this movie before. He reminded them that in the 1930s, people ignored the growing threat of the Nazis, and the result was World War II. He was saying, we cannot make that same mistake again. We can't just ignore this. But Churchill wasn't just there to point out the problems. He also came with a very clear solution. He laid out a two-step plan. First, he called for a special relationship between the US and Britain. They needed to team up, share their military knowledge, and stand together. And second, he wanted the new United Nations to have some real muscle, its own international army that could actually step in and stop countries from attacking others. And why did he think this was so crucial? Because he was convinced that the Soviet leaders only understood one thing, strength. In his view, they saw any weakness or division among the democracies as an opportunity to expand their own power. So, the speech is given. How did the world take it? Did everyone just stand up and applaud? Oh, not at all. The reaction was immediate, and it was intense. The Soviet Union's leader, Joseph Stalin, was absolutely furious. He even went so far as to compare Churchill to Hitler. And even in the West, some people were critical, calling Churchill a warmonger who was trying to start another fight. But a lot of other people breathed a sigh of relief, praising him for having the guts to say what they were all thinking. And this is why we're still talking about it today. When historians look back, many of them point to this very speech as the moment the starting gun was fired for the Cold War, that long, icy standoff between the United States and the Soviet Union that would define the rest of the century. And you can see its effects ripple out almost immediately. Just a year later, the US launched the Marshall Plan to help rebuild Western Europe. Then in 1949, NATO was formed, that big military alliance Churchill had called for. That's a vision, that Iron Curtain.
It stayed in place for over 4 decades, until the Berlin Wall finally came crashing down in 1989.
It's really important to get his goal right, though. He wasn't necessarily trying to start a shooting war. He wanted to find a way for the West and the Soviet Union to coexist. But, and this is the key, he believed that true peace could only happen from a position of strength, one that could protect freedom and democracy at all costs.
So, Churchill's speech was a warning that literally changed the world. And it leaves us with a pretty big question for our own time, doesn't it? In a world that's filled with all kinds of new challenges and threats, how do we decide which warnings to listen to? And maybe more importantly, when is the right time to act on them?